Welcome to the Coffee in the Barn. I'm Casey Bradley, President and founder of the Swine Group. If you are thinking about entering, changing, advancing, or reinventing your career in the animal science industry, we are here to help you succeed. In each episode, we will cover a variety of topics surrounding work, life, and professional development, leveraging my 20-plus years as a global leader within the livestock industry and my ever-growing professional network to interview other leading professionals. We couldn't do this without our sponsors, NutriQuest, IFF, and Continental Search. Reach out to us on our social media platforms or visit theswineGroup.com and subscribe now not to miss another episode. Hi everyone, this is Dr. Casey Bradley stepping in for Marissa Lorizet as your host for today's episode of Coffee in the Barn. If you've been reading anything out there in the business world, diversity has been one of the key topics of discussion. Whether it involves inclusiveness, company culture, how do we get more minorities into positions of power? It's a broad topic. But if you want to be successful in animal science, we have a very diverse industry, from the type of livestock that we feed, to the type of production systems we have, to the type of companies we have, from small feed companies, large producers, small genetic companies, heritage breeds, commercial lines. When you think of animal science, the diversity within that industry is huge on its own. And then we look at agriculture across the world, and we come into contact with all types of cultures and people within our industry. But when it comes to being successful as an animal scientist, diversity and including others is really key to this. It doesn't matter if you're a CEO running a company or a new student starting out, being able to work across the gamut of different cultures around the world will be essential to your success as either an individual or an organization. So today we're going to take a clip from one of our webinars on diversity with Dr. Victor Perez, Dr. Elizabeth Krasinski, and Dr. Joshua Genza, where they're going to be talking about different diversity things. I also caught up with one of my students that serves on our Coffee and Careers in Animal Science Committee, Edward Shang. Here, he's a graduate student finishing his PhD up at the University of Minnesota. He's originally from China and has studied in the U.S. for the last few years. We're going to talk about his experiences and his point of view regarding diversity on the farming or agriculture industry. You can find out more about this webinar called Diversity in the Global Industry of Animal Science on our YouTube channel, which is Animal Science Office Hours. The question is, how does the role of women in ag industry vary around the world since you've worked around the world? And then how can we stand out? And then to that, how have you balanced raising your daughters and thriving professionally?
Those are two really good questions. I think the first one kind of span almost a 30-year history of being in the poultry industry in the United States. I first started with the vaccine company. I was very young, didn't know much about the portfolio or about the industry. I had better reception being a female poultry veterinarian if I went to Latin America or Asia than I did if I went to the South. During that 2.5 years I worked for Solvay, I never went to Georgia, never went to Alabama. Now, this is back in the 90s. Things have changed dramatically since then, but it was definitely a perception that they'd be more cooperative working with developing world countries, Mexico, but at that time it was pretty much Venezuela, Puerto Rico, etc. But I think that's changed a lot now. I think that there are so many more women that are in both in veterinary medicine and poultry medicine and the food animal industry. I don't think you'll face those same sort of biases today. I think it's really improved dramatically. I think the international, what helps with that is that you're viewed less as a female or person of color than you are from the U.S. and an expert because of the gravitas of the U.S. knowledge base in the U.S., the size of the U.S. industries. So I've never had any issues. I'd say probably the hardest uphill battle I had was I spent 2 weeks in Moscow one time teaching some coursework on USDA Food Safety Inspection Service courses, regulations to regulators in Moscow with another colleague of mine. And the first day, they all sat in the audience and looked very glum and serious. And by the end of it, they were standing up and yelling in Russian and pointing fingers at us. But 3 days into it, we were all drinking vodka together and everything's fine. And about 6 months later, they came to the US and I hosted them for a tour around facilities and through Washington, D.C. So a lot of it's just a fear of the unknown. And I think once you break through that barrier and become personalized with someone, have a personal relationship, it really changes that dynamic. Well, having a family and having a career, especially one that has a lot of travel, even going to professional meetings, of course, is challenging. And you have to cultivate a support network to be able to make that work. I think if you ask my daughters today, did they enjoy their childhood with my travel? They would say no. But as they're 23 and 32, as adult young women now making their way, I think it was a good role model for them about how you can juggle both a personal home life, family life, and work life. Sometimes they clash. Sometimes it was hard. I, missed a lot of things, but you need supportive people that can help you kind of carry on keeping the home fires lit while you're off doing your thing. The advantages, it provided a good money for a good standard of living and education for both of them. So I think they fully appreciate that now that they're a little bit older.
I would just echo your comments, Beth. I think I struggled more. I've been in the industry now for over 20 years in production and worked my way up as well, similar to Victor. It was much more challenging to be respected as a female, I guess, in the US than it's ever been for me across the country, world, I guess, and the more education I got, I don't know if it's because I was seen differently as an expert that helped change it. But I would say today, even in the US, things are much different than it ever used to be. I would like to hopefully say some of those barriers are changing.
I think with agriculture in general, it's been a good old boy network and very, very male dominated. But I think a lot of that's changed, over the years because so many more women have come through the Ph.D. programs, come through professional schools, and have worked in production and worked in meaningful roles in production. So I think it's a whole new generation that you're going to face. Some of the old guys, still might be a little bit of a challenge gaining their respect and having them actually respect your skills. But I think the younger generations are much better. I think a lot of the people that are in their 50s, 40s, 30s had mothers that worked and maybe had professional parents. So that makes a big difference for them too. Or have spouses that are professional, and that makes a huge difference, right, in their perspective.
I would like to add a comment regarding the balance, raising family and growing professionally. As a divorced parent raising my daughter, I can totally relate to that as well. It's been a big challenge and being in positions that require quite a bit of traveling as well. So I absolutely see the value on developing and keeping that network support. It's fundamental. I also would say from my experience that there are companies that are a lot more friendly or more sensitive toward family than others. Finding that environment where family may come first, I think also makes a difference. At least it has been making a difference for myself.
So I can relate to the stresses of that. Although personally, my arrangement with my wife is very traditional in that she's the stay-at-home mom, at least until the kids are all old enough to be in school full time. But to the point about some employers being more supportive of family time and other demands, one of the neatest things I found when I joined BASF is that they have a program as part of their base benefits package where they have a service that they contract with that will, I believe it's up to 80 hours a year. They will pay to have a sitter come and watch your children when you're traveling. So as kind of a fill-in to enable you to go do that travel if your normal babysitter's not available or something else like that. And it's a really neat service because it will also help you find a sitter. When I joined BASF, I had moved from Minnesota to New Jersey didn't know anybody, didn't have a social network yet built up of friends and family and connections through schools and things like that. And it was really, really helpful because when I had to travel and my wife had to schedule doctor's appointments or other things, we could lean on this service to have somebody come and watch the younger ones for 4 hours while she goes to the doctor and the older ones are in school. And that's been super helpful. We don't use it as much now, obviously COVID, but even last couple of years, we've not needed it as much as our network has developed. But it was a godsend the first probably 2 or 3 years with BASF. It's a national program, so it's the kind of thing that you can ask for or ask about when you're doing the interview process. Is this something that the company offers? Because that's super valuable, in my opinion.
That's great. I wish I would have had that back in the day.
Well, I was going to say, I will be leading a group, and the Sunswine group may become a nonprofit if all goes well. But through ASAS, to kind of start that way, we are looking at a group of companies based on this symposium that will be offered in the spring for women in ag, but not just for women, but we are going to try to create a program that we will offer childcare at the meetings for working parents that need that. And we hope to branch that out more than just ASAS by forming the nonprofit. But there will be diversity in the Diversity Foundation ASAS has. Supposedly, hopefully that project and initiative will kind of go into that group, was what I was told, that they're hoping to position that. But I have DuPont, Evonik, a lot of other Cape Fear, different organizations really coming with me, Land O'Lakes, about how we can, what Josh talks about, and help support working parents. I understand that point. I don't have a network either, so I've had to pay people. Luckily have found friends with high school daughters or through care.com and things to have. My husband and I, specifically his work schedule, he's a police officer, so he works nights. We don't really like that. But when he works nights and I travel, it makes it easiest for us to pay somebody to come just spend the night with Arthur. And we're not having to find somebody to pick him up from daycare and feed him while my husband's still working during the days, because they're 12-hour shifts. And then also find somebody to come at 4:30 in the morning as my husband gets ready to go to work, for instance. So it's having that trade-off in conversations and partners, and single parents have it worse. So I feel for you, Victor, on that. And just finding that balance. And, I had a boss tell me my first 2 years of my job that I should not have kids in your first 2 years of your career. I'm telling you, when I find European-based companies much more agreeable to families, women. There's still those challenges, but it's finding the right partner and working through that. But it can be possible. I've had to change my career. I'm not traveling the world, but I think that's probably better for me too, and healthier for my family. So you do have trade-offs, but as you said, be open-minded.
Yeah, I think those are good points. I was single for most of the child rearing window. That is a challenge. I had to hire people that would come. I had a woman who was retired and was trying to earn extra money. She was putting her daughter through, she wasn't quite retired. She was still working, but she was older, putting her daughter through college. And so she was happy to come stay with my 6-year-old overnight all week while I was gone. And then she'd pack up. When I came home, she was ready to head out the door and I was home for the weekend. It was a great arrangement for both of us. But it does take flexibility, and it takes really kind of doing some digging to find the right match. That's not at an exorbitant rate, not an au pair or something like that you really kind of don't have the resources for necessarily.
Well, I did the au pair too, and that didn't work very well. So yeah, I don't recommend it.
I have a friend who did it too. It was a mixed bag. But it is hard. It's definitely something that women, I think, shoulder more than men, although there are men like you, Vic, that have that problem, have that situation. And it just adds an extra layer of complexity. This point in my life, my girls are grown, but I'm also purposely don't have any pets and I don't have any plants, or just a couple, which could die if they need to, because I went through so many years of trying to juggle having everything kept alive at home while I was Eastern Europe for 3 weeks in a row or something. And so, it is, you're just going to pick your path and see what works for you in your particular situation at the time.
And I think this goes into Vic's comment a little bit too about being exposed to diversity. So it's really funny. My husband does a lot of the sharing of that I travel. And you know who's the hardest on him at work and gives him the most crap? It's female police officers.
Oh, really?
It's the women that harass him a lot and not as supportive. So I find that really odd, the feedback he's gotten. And it's a tough environment because you got to be really kind of masculine in that job. And it's just, I'm blessed to have people and colleagues that are supportive of me in every company or across companies that understand and are supportive, and where my husband doesn't have that support network. So, our industry is blessed. It's a very family oriented agriculture. And I think that helped.
As we wait for more questions here, I would like to echo a comment from Beth. When it comes to precisely trying diversity or exposing yourself to a more diverse environment, one of the things that I see is there's always some resistance to not make a fool of yourself in a situation. We certainly want to stand up, but not in a ridiculous way. But I would say just be brave and roll over. And at some point, we are going to make the ridiculous. We are going to do something weird, but just move ahead, enjoy the ride, and have the ability to laugh about yourself. I think that's part of the emotional IQ. And I will share an experience as well, traveling to Brazil. We were visiting customers and we were given only an hour for meeting with these customers. And in one case, there was a 45-minute meeting. And to me, it was a little bit frustrating because I had a lot to share. And actually, flying all the way from US to Brazil, getting there, the jet lag and whatever, and then having just a short time. But anyway, however, they were very, very friendly. And so the first thing after greeting was taking us to the kitchen to drink coffee. And coffee was strong and hot. And I don't drink really hot beverage in general. I was taking my time. And at some point I thought, well, I actually going to keep it, save it for the time for the discussion. I will be doing more of the talking. So I could be, drinking my coffee over the discussion. But a small chat just kept going and going and going to nowhere. And, eventually I ended my coffee and ended up with a very short time to do, the business discussion. The second time happened exactly the same way. And I actually grew quite a bit frustrated and told the local guy, the account manager that traveled with me, about my frustration. And he was very kind. But he said, if you don't drink coffee, maybe next time you can try the water and skip the social chat because they are waiting for you to finish your coffee. Oh, gosh, I was... They were also frustrated with me by dragging the social chat for that. But anyway, that's at some point it's going to happen if you're exposed to that kind of diversity. And nothing happens, just make a fun of it, and that's it.
It's like diversity of customs, right? There's such a change. I know if you ever go to Eastern Europe, for females, you can opt out of the vodka and drink wine. This massive meal in the middle of the day with toast. Everyone's drinking vodka and doing shots. And by the end of it, if you don't pace yourself, you are done for the day. And they go back to work. I don't know how they're used to it somehow. So there's some ways, ask your host, like your account manager or whatever, how do I get around this without imbibing half a bottle of vodka at lunchtime?
That is a very good point about diversity in culture and drinking. I have the very same problem. You can insult them by turning it down. Mm-hmm. And I'm a lightweight. So a few times of working with my AB Vista guys and the amount that they can drink compared to what I can drink and still function. Like you said, Beth, talking to the local person to say, hey, and the Chinese are especially that way. They will at dinner really drink and get drunk. And it's a tough road to have that balance of not insulting people and culture and, respecting yourself too.
Yeah.
Regardless of gender. That's culture there, I think.
Yeah. No, I'd say a warning, kind of a cautionary tale on the other side. We have some dietary patterns here that aren't that well accepted internationally, particularly veganism. And the gluten-free, you will struggle finding foods to eat. And also people will think that you're a little bit on the odd side if you insist on these different foods when you're over in these other, especially Asian culture, But even I went to Spain not too long ago. They just don't have gluten-free. They're a culture of eating crusty bread and lots of meat dishes and fish dishes. And so to find those kind of diets in those cultures, especially if you're in a rural area, you can expect to have a real challenge with that. Food for thought, figure out how you're going to work around it if it's a critical issue to you.
Food. I carry food with me just in case I can't eat some of the food.
Yeah, I carried food to Russia. Crackers and cookies, toilet paper. That was a long time ago.
Gosh, do you have any crazy stories like that?
Yeah, I do. Not necessarily at the level of Vic's. One of the best pieces of advice I got before I started doing international travel was to ask whoever is bringing you in what the norms are, where the landmines are before you go. So that way you're prepared for things like, you have to finish your coffee before you have the technical discussion, or worked with some customers in Latin America where a meeting time is a suggestion. It's both for the start time and the duration. It's not necessarily a guarantee. So if you have a meeting at 1:00, don't be surprised if they're still somewhere else and you're just waiting for them to show up at 2, and then, or the meeting will change 2 or 3 times the day of because they're bouncing around. And so flexibility, I think, is a big part of accepting that something might change, something might not fit your initial expectation, and you just kind of have to roll with the punches a little bit. I've been relatively lucky in not having too many uncomfortable situations, but the other thing that I genuinely liked, particularly in working in the northern part of South America, is that flexibility on timeline can work in your favor. If you're coming in and having a conversation with somebody and you're booked for 30 minutes and you capture their interest, you can keep their attention for longer than the 30 minutes you were originally scheduled for without too much difficulty. And then you can get more impact from your visit. And a big part of preparing, I think, when you're leaving your home market is doing a little bit of research on the market you're going to, who the big players are, how does production there differ from what you're used to, diet types, management practices. Are barns electrified? Do they have electricity to control the lighting or not? Or is it based purely on ambient lighting? Do they have air conditioning or environmental controls? In many countries, poultry houses are not air conditioned at all. If it's 100 degrees and 90% humidity, those birds are just going to suffer. And how do they manage those birds differently? So you have to do a little bit of research if you want to avoid being caught by surprise, but you do need to be willing to laugh at yourself when you do get caught flat-footed, because how you handle that will tell whoever you're working with a lot about your character. And if you can roll with the punches, people are going to invite you back.
Edward, we're going to pick you to start this conversation on diversity. You took a big leap of leaving your home country, China, coming to the U.S. You've adapted well. You've been very successful. Kind of talk about diversity and what was hard for you in that journey.
So let me start with a story. My grandma was asking me when we were FaceTiming yesterday. She asked me, "Oh, it's cold outside. You're only wearing one shirt. Are you sure you're not cold?" Well, because my grandma lived in a poor life her whole life. She has never seen a heater. She doesn't even know heaters exist. Even though I explained many times that while we have heaters inside, so it's warm, she still doesn't know what that is because she has never seen one. And that's probably where I want to start with diversity. When you go out and meet different cultures and seeing different people and seeing new things, you realize, okay, there's not only one way of living, or there's not only one way of being a person. There's so many different options or possibilities. And then you start to open up your whole world and seeing different and being able to accept different facts instead of staying in your own little world. So, and that's the reason why I came to the US, because I can stay home forever, right? Never leave my home country, never leave my home state. But then coming to a different country, seeing how different political systems, education systems, everything, you realize, wow, there are a different way to do things, and then allow you to think differently. And then when you apply those things to your own area of study, you I think it encourage more creative thinking or critical thinking. And that's very important. If we go to a company, you'll have only one type of person. Probably is not going to be as innovative as other companies because and especially when we're going to the future of agriculture, right? You don't just want an animal scientist at barn. You want data scientists. You want the modeling people. You want the IT people. You're going to work together with all these people to create a better future. But if you only accept those facts in your own area, you will probably reject what other people say. And then I think that's going to be a problem.
No, I love that story and reflecting on my life and some of the things and talking about, Marissa and I were just talking about this the other day. Neither one of us really want to go back and live in our hometowns per se, because, and I noticed that when I go back, is the people who've stayed, their mindsets are just so different. And I'm more open to more ideas because I've met people all over the world and I've always been curious. So meeting new people and meeting new cultures and being around different people that like different things is part of my thirst of knowledge and learning and that continuous learning. Most people think you have to go to school to learn or learn out of a book. Well, no, I've learned a lot more from people and experiences. And so I guess I've always been different in understanding that. But I also see back to the people who've never left their state or hometown that we also have to be considerate of that a little bit because they don't know different. They don't know why things are different. And I think, you know, it's not just in the U.S., this tension of race and diversity, and even in society, men versus women. And I tell everybody, I am not a feminist. I still want to be a woman, but I want to be successful in my own way. And I think a lot of times, even when we talk about diversity, for a lot of times that conversation gets into promoting women up over men, for instance, or having equality, or different races having equality. We get in that conversation of diversity. And I think, you know, I want everybody to be who they want to be and be good at what they want to be and have no limitations. Edward, you flipped that coin just a minute ago. I think you're really important to say when we're trying to solve problems, because we're feeding the world and we constantly have a lot of problems in animal ag. I loved your thought process. It's not even just about diversity of where we came from in the world or our gender or whatever else label you want to put on it. But hey, we need people with different strengths. I thought that was really cool. And I think a lot of times when we talk about diversity, I think even a lot of companies miss that point, that they talk about it from the standpoint of bringing women up to equality or a different race or minority up to that. And no, I want everybody to be successful. And I love that part. What is your thoughts on diversity?
Yeah, kind of going off of what you said, leaving my hometown, moving 12 hours away from home for my education, it's kind of opened my way of thinking and just like how people live and the difference between that and then attending a school where there's a lot of diversity in our department. That's really opened my eyes to a lot of things. And I love talking to people about their cultures or just having different conversations and kind of having an open mindset and kind of just like learning about the different cultures. I think is been a really integral part of like, you know, kind of exploring within my means. I would hope one day that I get the opportunity to kind of explore internationally and kind of be immersed into different cultures in that way. But since I haven't had the opportunity yet, it's been a great experience kind of being able to experience culture in a small setting of just being in a university with a lot of diversity.
I was also going to say, though, when we go internationally, and I think, Edward, I really respect what you've done here in the U.S. I see a lot of international students. They tend to migrate to other students from their country, speak that language. They don't really try to learn and dive into that culture. So that is one positive thing I see that you do with your career, that you've really embraced coming here to get that exposure as much as you can. But I can say when you go to other countries about diversity, you still need to be respectful of their way of life. And I get a lot of times that, and I get really upset about it. It really kind of hurts when they say this. Just because you do it that way in America doesn't mean it's going to work here. And they automatically put me in this box of the arrogant American and thinking my way is the best way. Then they get to know me and they're like, oh, I hope I've never asked him. I'm like, did you realize that I wasn't that arrogant of American? And
yeah, I completely understand, because before I came to the US, a lot of the news and media says, well, Americans are racist. But when I go to rural America, a lot of people treat me like one of them, which warms my heart. And it's different than what the media says, right? You know, when you go there and meet different people, you know, wow, that's the truth. Americans are nice, right? Most people are very nice, just like anybody else in the world. And for me, when I first came to this country, a lot of people have labels. Oh, Chinese people, you guys are shy, you're not talkative, you tend not to be leaders. But I think throughout this 10 years, I've proven people I can be very confident, all right? I can be very talkative, and I can be a leader. You know, I want to change some of the labels, because once you start labeling people, it kind of sees through a tunnel. But in fact, we are all the same. We just happen to have different appearances.
Well, I think that that's where that bias comes in through. And I don't know, I hate the word racism. I think it's more bias. I think it's ignorance. People don't know. And I got to see this very early on, even at college. We'll just go back to MSU. Xingfu is a leading researcher now, and I think he works down at not UC Davis, but Texas Baylor system. I think he works in a similar lab or department as Teresa Davis does, and that's why I'm getting it mixed up. But I just remember the farm staff there would just chew him out right and left and talk so mean to him because his English wasn't that good. You know, and that same farm staff person would talk to us women like that because we were girls. And, you know, I got exposed to the very negative stuff. And then I go commercially and I see it with the immigrant labor, that because they don't speak English, and then you really get to start talking to them. Like I met this one girl, and I don't remember her name, unfortunately, in Wyoming. And here she's got a bachelor's degree in botany or something like that. So, you know, plants, right? Agronomy, plants, botany. Can't remember what she called it. But I said, well, why are you working at a pig farm? This is the only job I could get, and my English isn't that good. And I'm like, some of those moments really, really defined how I was going to be. And I'm like, I'm going to use this opportunity. These people are incredible. And everywhere I've went, like you said, in the world, people are really nice. Sometimes they're not nice. And then you just be like, whatever. And it's funny. People talk about personalities of the Dutch versus the German versus over there. And I'm just like, yeah. So, you know, I grew up in a German Dutch area. I think I get along with them. I get him. And it's just so funny, people, what they think. And then I have found in my career, people are people. Everybody is their own individual. And the minute we stop putting labels on and that bias and that unconscious bias that we talk about, you know, I probably still have some unconscious bias, and I try to be the most open, but it's still there, and it's just something we have to be aware of. But yeah, it goes back to, I said it in a different episode, like I want to hire the person for who they are as a person and not what boxes they can check.
Right.
And I hope someday society can get to that, to where we hire the person for their strengths and their skills and stop checking boxes.
Going back to diversity, right? Everybody has something special. We're not talking about race, gender, or anything. It's just individual. Every individual, we are all diverse. And then when you have a company or have a group, then you want to do things differently. Maybe that different person you brought in has something special that you're not capable of doing, but they are. So I think that's also what diversity means. When you have a group, you find talents that you may not have, and then they can contribute, you know.
Today's globalization obligates organizations to evaluate the impact on its people, process, and profit of international and ethnic cultural differences. But realizing how diverse and full of different cultures the animal science industry is, I've had the chance to get to know people from all over the world working in the same or different areas. And this only proves that we all share a common goal: to learn and to improve every day as humans, as farmers, as business people. And where are you listening from? We hope that you enjoyed this discussion. You can watch the replay of this webinar, along with the rest of our webinar replays, on our YouTube channel, Animal Science Office Hours. And now we would like to also thank our sponsors once again, NutriQuest, IFF, and Continental Search. We are gracious that you support us in this journey. Before we go, Are you finding it difficult to create your own version of success? Do you even know what success looks like for you? Well, if you don't, I suggest that you reach out to the Sunswine Group by visiting our website and booking your free next steps. We'll discuss your career and how the Sunswine Group can help you navigate that. Because our model is simple. We make pigs and dreams fly. Our mission is to share knowledge, to mentor future leaders, and transform innovation while creating a neural network of expertise to help any person, including you, any animal, or any company succeed. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to check out our socials. Find us on Facebook and LinkedIn at Coffee and Careers in Animal Science or Instagram at coffee.and.careers. And remember, life is short. Drink your coffee in the barn.